Welcome to another day in the Matrix. This is Red Pill Podcast 243, and I'm sure I'm not alone when I say this, but man, am I looking forward to this 47th week of the year to be behind us. Sheesh. What a soap opera this week has been. And not only did we have the whole Bitcoin is tied to Epstein narrative this week, but we also had the Michael Saylor narrative at the same time. I mean, come on, how hard is the market maker gonna try to convince retail of what they want them to believe? We're literally on a full week, actually 2 full weeks straight of seeing extreme fear here in crypto land. And some other variants of this fear and greed index have even displayed readings that hit lower than the FTX crash, which, by the way, was in the month of November back in 2022. Bitcoin was trading at 15K back then. And I want you to remember this key number 15, because remember, the key code for this year has been the number 47 ever since Trump became the 47th president of the United States. And once he was sworn in, the market topped and then crashed into the date of April 7th, the 4-7 date, 47 code. And I bring this up because this number 47 is the 15th prime number, and Bitcoin's last bear market bottomed at 15K on that FTX crash. And that was also a total lunar eclipse, by the way. So for the OGs that are here in our community, the OG wolves, perhaps some of you remember back on April 5th of 2022, that was Satoshi Nakamoto's 47th birthday, and Bitcoin traded to a high of 47K on that day. And that was the last time that Bitcoin traded at 47K, all the way until the first official Bitcoin ETF was launched almost 2 years later. And in the midst of that time frame, Bitcoin hit a cycle low of 15K. Again, the number 47 is the 15th prime number. So this 47 code has been part of Bitcoin's identity for some time now. And this crash we just experienced happened during the 47th week of this year. And what's even more sinister about this crash is the fact that if you measured from Bitcoin's current all-time high, which was on October 6th, to this past Friday, November 21st, which is so far the lowest price Bitcoin has traded into this crash, it's exactly 47 days. And remember, guys, earlier this year, the stock market actually topped on February 19th and then crashed into April 7th, the 4-7 date with the 47 code, and those two dates are exactly 47 days apart. So it took 47 days for the stock market to go from all-time high to its crash bottom on the 4-7 date. And here we are again seeing Bitcoin top out and then crash for 47 days, perfectly into the 47th week of this year, which concludes today, as tomorrow naturally kicks off the 48th week of this year. So, hopefully, at least based off this code, we should be in the clear. But of course, I'll break this down in much greater detail during this Red Pill podcast here today, and we'll make sure to deep dive into the setup for this week ahead, of course. And since I had so many requests this upcoming Black Friday, I decided to run an exclusive sale for our mastermind community here, which is an even bigger discount than the one that's going to be available to the public. And overall, this will be my biggest sale ever, even on the package deals, which are now up to 35% off. And as Patreon supporters here, you'll have this promo code that you can use at checkout. That'll give you the biggest discount available on any of my individual courses, which cover everything from investing to decoding to even health and wellness and mindset coaching. As I've said, this is my biggest sale ever. So if you're interested in picking up one of my courses, this is your chance to get the best value I've ever offered. And if you want even bigger savings, consider these packages. I have this holistic package right over here. It includes my 3 main mastermind courses, which are previewed next to each other here at the left. And then I have the crypto package, which includes my advanced trading course. This is for those who are specifically focused on investing and trading. And lastly, I have this universal package, which was a very popular request. It actually includes all of my courses for 35% off, saving almost $350 off the original price. That's like essentially getting my decoding mastermind for free. So this beats out what I did for Black Friday last year. And just so you're aware, for these packages, you'll see they have their own unique promo codes. So just make sure that you could copy that code right there. And then that'll make it easier to paste later on in the coupon code section in the checkout page. And if you want to learn more about any of these courses, just simply click this Learn More tab right below the plan card here, and then you'll see a pop-up that actually covers everything you need to know about that specific course. And this sale is currently live. You could use this special link to this exclusive Patreon offer in the description below this video, and you'll also be able to find the link in the pinned comment below as well. I'm really appreciative and I'm so grateful for all of your continued support. I really poured my heart and soul into these courses, so I know they're packed with value, but even more importantly, they're packed with unique knowledge that's not found in the mainstream. It's a culmination of my life's work, and it means the world to me to be a part of your journey, truly. So now we have a lot to cover in today's Red Pill. Let's get into it, but quickly before we get started, make sure to get relaxed, get comfortable, grab yourself a cup of coffee or a tea if it's a little later in the day or earlier in the day, and a glass of wine or beer, any beverage of your choice if it's getting a little later out there in the Matrix. Got that a little mixed up. Mercury retrograde vibes. And also make sure to comment below this post here on Patreon to vote on the altcoins that you'd like me to cover in next week's Red Pill podcast. But please, before you leave a comment, just make sure that you use the search function here on Patreon to check that I have not covered that project in at least 3 months. And in the event that it's been over 3 months since I've reviewed that altcoin, or if I've never covered that altcoin before, as long as it has 1 year of chart history, you can go ahead and comment below with the name of the altcoin and include the ticker symbol next to it as well. And whatever submissions get the most likes, those top 4 will be selected for next week's Red Pill. So let me just quickly check, make sure I am sounding good. Yeah. Now, since you're all aware of the 47 code ritual that we just experienced, as we're wrapping up the 47th week of this year later today. Actually, let me just quickly check because we had Bitcoin's month or weekly close. No way. So, guys, I didn't have this planned. I just realized we had the weekly close and Bitcoin closed at 86K. And the reason that's so important is because the top right now is the date October 6th. So, sorry. October. Let me just make sure I am 100% yes. We just talked about this. October 6th, 47 days over to this Friday, right? So again, not scripted at all. We have this 86 code. Octo is octagon. It is octopus, 8, right? Prefix of 8 in Latin. This is the 8-6 date. The 86 days left in the year. And Bitcoin closes off this week at 86K. Gorgeous. All right, I'm so excited for today's Red Pill. This is wild ritual. I have to give a mini round of applause to the Apex Predator. You guys are legends. You can't get mad at this stuff, guys. You have to see it for what it is, and this is why I've become so stoic about all of this. And I was back here making red pills when Bitcoin was 15K. So if I could have went back then and told you guys, hey, someday in a couple of years, we're going to have 100K Bitcoin, Guaranteed it's going to be 120K. When we look back at the sentiment when it was 15K, nobody would have believed that. Because back here, people thought we were going to 7K. Over here, people thought the cycle was also over and that we would go back to 10K. Over here, people thought Bitcoin hit a double top, and then when we had this correction on the August new moon, I remember people thought that's it. They thought the same during the April 7th crash as well. I think this ritual's concluded. But again, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. I want to stay neutral here. Again, we are not bulls. We are not bears. We are wolves. So let's get into today's Red Pill podcast. As you're all aware, we have this 47 ritual complete so far. 47 days of crashing into the 47th week of the year. Bitcoin experienced, I believe, a 36% correction, which so far is the biggest correction that we've seen for Bitcoin this cycle. And not only is it the biggest correction, it's the steepest and quickest correction we've had. Checking in over here with a weekly RSI, where did we close off? Because if we got that 35, that's what I sent out in the market update to you guys. I said I'm anticipating around a 35 on the weekly RSI, and we have that as well. So things are looking actually pretty much in alignment with the expectations for the week that we're about to move into, which we're going to talk a lot about today. So this is a good setup, although I do believe there's probably a little bit of a CME gap below us, but I'll share my thoughts on that a little bit later. So we've had the biggest correction that we've had so far this cycle, pretty much the biggest correction we've had since this one over here, which was the end of the last cycle, as all of you are aware. And as mentioned earlier in the intro, this correction is coupled with multiple narratives. As I said, we had this Epstein thing, we had the Michael Saylor thing, and I'm going to share some more thoughts on the Michael Saylor thing in a separate podcast. But for now, I just kind of want to focus on this current sentiment, this extreme fear readout that we've been getting day after day and now week after week. And actually, I believe this is the longest run of extreme fear readouts we've ever seen. Pretty much ever, I believe. Now, of course, that's hard to be 100% certain on or confirm because there's many different indicators out there. But as for the most popular ones, the past weeks have just been perpetual negative sentiment. And actually, Google Analytics are tapering down pretty much all year. So not only do we have less people interested in Bitcoin and crypto throughout this entire year, pretty much going back to a year ago when Trump became president, but we're also having the sentiment of the current people in the market really in the dumps. So you have to keep that in mind when it comes to the people that are ultra bearish right now. You don't want to get too bearish at a time where everyone's bearish. So out of all the weeks for this to happen, it happened during the 47th week of this year. So what do you say, family? Ritual complete? Of course, we'll need to investigate further. And I do want to bring up the fact that April 7th, the April 7th crash is actually connected to today. Let me quickly show you this. So we have 4/7 into this date, November 23rd, here during today's Red Pill podcast, because they are connected by 33 weeks. And if we don't include the end date, it'll naturally be 33 weeks connected to tomorrow. That would be from Monday to Monday. So that's a fair way to consider it as well. And of course, we already have Bitcoin's daily close coming in, so we're primed for this connection regardless. So I think it's important to be cautious for those who are actively trading, especially leverage traders. Please be careful right now. Of course, the traditional markets and everything else will be opening together tomorrow. So especially after this recent Friday's VIX spike, just be cautious, all right? Words of wisdom from Chief Wolf. So 33 weeks from April 7th crash bottom, and I'm actually not just bringing up this connection because there's one single 33 master number connection for next week. I'm bringing this up because next week will also include the day that's leaving 33 days left in the year. This upcoming Friday, November 28th, as well as the following day, which is the 333rd 33rd day of the year. That's the master number with emphasis. Some would call this an angel number, 333, as the master number represents transmutation. Transmutation more in the physical sense. One could consider that 333 represents transmutation in a more etheric or a more spiritual sense, if you will. So like a non-physical, but still present in its effects energetically. I hope that makes sense to everybody. And again, if you're really interested in this decoding stuff, you want to know more about it, that's what my decoding mastermind is all about, which also includes this crypto decoding blueprint for free within it, which is really interesting and something I might add more to over time, just because we're about to move into a new solar cycle. We're currently in the midst of a lunar cycle. We will talk a little bit more about that today. And by the way, if I ever add new lessons to courses, these are one-time payments for lifetime access. So that means those new course lessons that are added will be included for free. So just keep that in mind if you're wondering about that. So coming back to this whole like 33333 connection, this is something that I think is pretty important because it's landing on the 2 dates of November 28th and November 29th. And those are crucial because those are the same days that both Saturn and Mercury will be going direct. So you can see right here, Saturn retrograde completes on the 28th of November, and Mercury retrograde is complete on the 29th, the following day. And I just showed you how those are the 33 days left in the year and the 333rd day of the year connected to the April 7th date by 33 weeks. And also regarding Saturn retrograde and Mercury retrograde and how they're happening simultaneously, clearly this combo was brutal, especially in a lunar cycle, because when we look at how we've been falling since the start of Mercury retrograde, it's pretty rare. There's not many iterations of a Mercury retrograde where you're just seeing this perpetual sell-off. And the same thing goes with the final 3 weeks of a Saturn retrograde. I showed you how about like 70 to 80% of the time, it's those final 3 weeks that are pretty bullish. So what's going on? Well, remember when I showed you the Saturn retrograde analysis, I showed you that in 2013, in the year of the snake, the last year of the snake that we had, we were actually bearish all the way until Saturn went direct again. Is that the same setup we're having now? And the fact that Mercury and Saturn are retrogrades are overlapping each other at this very interesting time of year, we know Bitcoin is in extremes during the month of November, whether it's extreme to the downside or extreme to the upside. So that's actually really good news regarding how oversold we've recently gotten. So another thing to mention regarding the combo of like Saturn retrograde and Mercury retrograde, the last time that we saw the daily RSI, or actually just RSI in general, this low was right over here. You see this spike down over here? If I hold my cursor, you'll see it was back in August of 2023, and that was a very similar setup that we had, and I'm going to show you. We had both Saturn and Mercury station retrograde, and we had almost the same chart structure. It's just here in late 2025, it's a little bit more stretched out, and that's fine because we're also looking at way different market cap, but the structure is something that I find to be fascinating here. So if I was to like turn off all the indicators and everything and just look purely on the chart structurally, you'll see that April of 2023 we top, and then we have a slightly higher high in the month of July, followed by a notable correction into the same zone of the lows that we had between these two peaks here. So we come back for what we could call a double bottom, if you want to make it super simple, which so far is what we just did. With the high in late January over here, we have a notable correction, which would be here. Then we have a pivot up, a slightly higher new all-time high, and then we have this correction into the same zone of lows that we had back over here with a dramatically oversold RSI to go with it during a Saturn and Mercury retrograde combo. And when we measure from April 7th until November 27th, you're going to see that these two dates are exactly 33 weeks and 3 days apart, leading into the day that leaves 33 days left in the year and the day that leads into the 333rd day of the year. That's in threes, three times the charm, perfectly into the final days of this Saturn and Mercury retrograde, which will both be officially concluding leading into next week's Red Pill podcast, by the way. So, next week's Red Pill is going to be spicy. And also keep in mind that the stock market will be closed for this upcoming Thursday, November 27th. So, crypto will be trading alone that day for the US Thanksgiving holiday. And after it was Thanksgiving in 2020, speaking of, when we saw the altcoins start to rally to catch up to Bitcoin at the end of that year, we also had a very weird correction in that time frame of 2020, which the only reason I'm bringing that up is because remember how similar this year has been to 2020, where if we zoom out even more, we have over here is your C19 crash. This was your tariff crash, then you recover, and then remember the Ethereum chart I was showing you is pretty much 1-to-1, where we had this new higher high into August, September, followed by a correction, and then this is what's slightly differing. But if you see right here, we had a brutal correction into Thanksgiving, followed by this kind of like keeling over into the middle of December. And everyone started to get super worried back here that, okay, what's going to happen next? And it got like very polarizing, very divided in the crypto community. And then Bitcoin just went on a tear all the way into the new year. So this was like the most violent breakout for Bitcoin in the whole entire run. And it was happening at a time where we were in a global lockdown. Like things were horrible regarding like state of affairs with just being a normal person. I mean, just to go to the grocery store was absolutely annoying if you didn't want to wear a mask or didn't want to comply with all that nonsense that we did for those 2 years. But what I teach is that the reason this was all happening was actually because of the solar cycle. And this is key because we will be talking about this a little bit later today. And we are actually deep into a lunar cycle. But the one thing that didn't happen this time around is a crazy alt season. And it's really fascinating how when you look into what the Fed's about to do starting in December, leading into the new year, and the fact that next year we're going to have a new Fed chair who's in the pocket of Trump exoterically, like it's not even a something you have to do some like research to figure out. I mean, it's pretty much the hand-picked selection by Trump comparatively to Powell, who he's talking shit about every single time he gets in front of a microphone. I mean, it's obvious that that setup is not what we expected. But energetically, Bitcoin did do a couple of things that I did anticipate regarding the solar cycle, which was hitting a new all-time high after the second lunar eclipse of a lunar cycle. That was special, and anyone who follows my work here knows that I've been talking about this since over here, since we started the solar cycle. I was mentioning very early on to not be shocked if Bitcoin can plant a new all-time high after this second lunar eclipse. And of course, this massive correction that we're getting right now is also after that second lunar eclipse. But you'll notice altcoins are actually holding up a lot better than, not all altcoins, but many top altcoins are actually holding up better than Bitcoin is right now. And Bitcoin dominance is looking very weak right now. And since I brought that up, if you were to look back at Bitcoin dominance in both 2017 and 2020, let me just zoom out a little bit for you. So we're looking at right over here, and we're looking at right over here. We're actually trading at, well, we have Bitcoin dominance at the same level. Effectively, it's right around 60%. So I know this sounds like hopium, but it isn't. It's just the facts. And the fact that we just had this correction happening into and during the 47th week of this year, it proves to me that we're at least close to finishing up this ritual in the week ahead. And it could very well be already complete when considering that this was a 47-day crash into the 47th week of the year. Now, keep in mind, when we hit April 7th, it was a couple of days of kind of uncertainty too. I mean, we have from April 7th, and then the next day was even more bearish because we had a lower daily close than we did on April 6th. And it wasn't until really like April 12th that we felt like we were out of it. So, I mean, it's hard to compare which to which, but if we were to look at when Bitcoin started to actually break out of this bearish energy, it took about 2 weeks, 15 days. So if we were to take 15 days off the low that we just had on November 21st, which was again tied to the date of October 6th, excuse me, by 47 days, you're going to see that would take us to around December 6th. And what's so fascinating about December 6th is that will be the week of the next, that'll be leading into the week, of the next FOMC meeting. And it's effectively when the Fed will stop QT. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But remember all those 33 connections that I shared with you for the week ahead? Well, I have another one. If you take Chinese New Year, which was on the 29th of January, and you were to measure that over to November 28th, which is the day leaving 33 days left in the year, you see there are 303 days apart. So when you remove the 0 using the rules of numerology, you have the master number 33 again. How insane is that? Especially because 303, 303 days, it actually finalizes 9 months, which we're going to go a little deeper right now, but I feel like this will bring you value, especially for those people that want to learn more about numerology. 9 is that number of completion because when you make it over to the number 10, you reduce that back to 1 again. 1 plus 0 becomes 1. So the 304th day, for example, that would be next Saturday. This is 10 months. So that would reduce to 1. And then you're back to the start of the cycle again, just like January 29th was the start of the new lunar year, the Chinese New Year. Where, speaking of which, since we're in the year of the snake, it's important to remind you all that snake in Gematria actually equals 50. And during the 50th week of this year, as you can see on December 8th, that'll be the next FOMC meeting week, where Fed Chair Powell will spellcast the markets on Wednesday, December 10th. And I was just telling you about that number 10. We have the 10th day, and it's the true 10th month because December is Deci in Latin, that is 10. Like a decimal point is 1 over. You have October, Octo 8, November, Nove 9. You get the rest. So just saying, I think this upcoming Fed meeting is a big date exoterically for anyone who's interested in these markets because of the recent jobs report. Again, some weirdness that's gone on in the midst of from the recent Fed minutes and the prior FOMC Fed minutes that effectively marked the top. And ever since then, we've just been on a slide. But rumor has it that starting December 1st, soft QE, quantitative easing, will begin quietly as QT is coming to an end. Oh, and I can't forget the astrology since we'll be moving into this esoteric sign of Ophiuchus. And this is the serpent bearer. We were just talking about the snake. The snake is the serpent. Buns out, riding the scorpion. But according to the most trusted sources, or at least most trusted sources, whatever that word trusted means here, the sun passes through the constellation Ophiuchus starting from November 29th. How perfect is that? Right as both Mercury and Saturn are stationing direct again into the 333rd day of the year. Remember, we're talking about the 29th. And this will also be the weekend of the 48th week of the year. And the reason I bring that up is because Ophiuchus equals 48 in Gematria. And the sign ruler of Ophiuchus is considered to be Pluto, and the mirror of the number 48 is 84. So it's all interconnected. Again, the number following this key number 47 is 48. We see a crazy bounce on April 8th, which started the recovery from that crash. So 46 and 48 have a relationship with 47, just like the eve of Christmas has a relationship with Christmas Day, which has a relationship with the following day. Or you look at New Year's Eve followed by New Year's Day, changing the energy and the numerology that we were once working with. So you always want to look at numbers in their relationship to each other. This is something we do a lot here with the master numbers, and we also do with the prime numbers. But I want to stay on track here. Speaking of Pluto, Pluto is the god of true wealth, not Mercury, who's the trickster. Remember, Mercury is the god of commerce and merchandise. That's where we get that name from, and basically the fiat money system, what many pronounce as fiat. This is all mercurial. Again, the symbol of Mercury is the eagle. And what's the symbol of the Federal Reserve System? It's the eagle, because it's Mercury. It's the trickster. It's nothing Plutonian. It's nothing to tie back to Pluto, which that's its own kind of stuff we can get into. But that's mostly dog symbolism, Cerberus, symbolism of diamonds, underground resources, even gold, silver, palladium, copper. That'd be more Pluto vibes than anything tied to Mercury. But let's stay on track here. You guys are probably learning a lot today with this little streams of consciousness that I'm going into here and there. So please take notes, because a lot of this stuff is very valuable. It's very helpful for how you perceive what's happening here in these markets. But keep in mind that we'll be in the sign of Ophiuchus starting next weekend until the date of December 17th, which is the first day of Saturnalia. And actually last year we prematurely topped on December 17th, the first day of Saturnalia. And if you go back to the cycle in 2017, we topped on December 17th, the first day of Saturnalia. So for those people that think that the bull run is actually over, just consider the relationship that Bitcoin has with these particular dates, and how actually everything this year has been the opposite of last year, at least based on the month to month, where last year we had a super bullish, epic November, and this year it's been just all down. You see, this was November all up. Now we're doing the reverse. Kind of fascinating, right? Just a flip of the energy. And that's how the market maker does what they do best. It's all just ritualized, and they're using astrology, numerology, and gematria as a flex. It's just their flex against us. And by the way, we're not going to pay too much attention to what we're seeing right now in the price action, because traditional stock market's closed. We already had the weekly close. CME has opened up. I believe there's a CME gap to the downside, but I purposefully wanted to get this one out after we've had these confirmations, because it's not worth making these too early, especially in this very chaotic, polarizing market environment. And I'm sure those of you who have been following me for long enough actually really appreciate that. But let's get back to this, wrap up our decode, and then get into these charts. We were talking about that 47 code, and numerologically, the key number of 47 having a relationship with the numbers 46 and 48, and how there's the before and after effect. And considering how back in February, it actually took 47 days for Bitcoin, from Bitcoin breaking support right over here into bottoming on April 7th. Let me show you. I'm going to take from 44.7 date. I'm going to go back 47 days, and you see what we were doing. Right there was when we were heading into the crash, perfectly bottoming on 47 days. And then 47 days later, Bitcoin hit a new all-time high in the month of May. Now, a lot of people want to know, like, what am I expecting next? So now I'm going to get into a couple scenarios with you guys, okay? We could have like 3 basic scenarios. If we are in fact at the bottom of this move for Bitcoin, one would be actually 47 days of sideways from November 21st. So that would be like up until the first week of January. This would be specifically 47 days of sideways at the lows. So that would be seeing Bitcoin trade between 80K to 100K for around 47 days. That would actually be a repeat of what happened between May over to July of this year, when Bitcoin recovered from that 4.7 crash for 47 days. And then when I zoom in, you're going to see from that exact date for 47 days, we traded sideways and then we broke out the following day. So it's perfectly coded, okay? This is why I'm thinking this way. It could be a possibility. This would be like a very arduous and boring phase for Bitcoin because everybody's expecting us to go lower, lower, lower right now. But Bitcoin would actually do something that no one really wants, which is just a bunch of sideways, a bunch of boredom. That could effectively be something like what we're seeing over here. So just like a 7-week period of chopping at lows. That's one scenario that's very, very plausible. I know some people that are listening to this right now, the eyes are rolling in the back of your head, but you need to understand that this is kind of the vibe that happens after a major market crash and when everyone starts thinking they know what's coming next. They hit us with a boredom phase after there was a very, very polarizing bullish to bearish phase. Now, again, the scenarios I'm about to lay out with you do not mean that I am prioritizing one or the other. I am over time, I need to see how this market stabilizes and then I could start making some more definitive calls. But my truth is that I do not think it is over. So this is why these 3 scenarios that I'm about to get into are based on the idea that Bitcoin's currently going to be in a bottoming structure overall. So like I said, mimicking the May through July timeframe, effectively from there to there, 47 days at the lows. And second scenario that I'd consider is a V-shaped recovery, where Bitcoin goes back to like 105K up to 109K, for example, and then once a big portion of the recently placed leverage shorts are squeezed, so once they're liquidated, we'd get some FOMO vibes coming back in right above 100K, and simultaneously we'd have all the TA guys, people that purely talk about TA on their channels, they will start screaming that this is the relief rally / retrace where Bitcoin comes back into the golden pocket of the Fibonacci retracement, and then we roll over into lower lows like a dead cat bounce for continuation into a bear market, which is currently what most people are expecting. And you should be cautious when everyone is expecting the same thing, because retail investors who don't know about TA are purely reacting to price and they think it's over. You can't blame them. Bitcoin just had a 36% correction. And simultaneously, any retail investors who watch TA channels, who consume TA content, whether that's on YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, whatever, they are either expecting more downside in the immediate short term or a relief rally. That's the coin toss. Very few are expecting a new all-time high. And again, I can't blame those people because look at the price action. And that's kind of what rules over everything. Price rules all. So most of my timeline has become full-blown bearish, and the fear and greed index represents that perfectly right now. So what would give a twist to this second scenario, which, by the way, I'm just reminding you, it would be kind of like this V-shaped recovery vibe, where we stop out at around, 105 to 109, if I remember what I said correctly. And then the twist would be that after that relief rally, when Bitcoin does get rejected and it pulls back to maybe 93, 95K, then we get bought up from there and hit a new all-time high. That combo no one would expect, as most people are currently expecting either lower prices from here starting next week and Bitcoin's bear market just continuing and continuing without stopping. And most people are also not expecting Bitcoin to hit a new all-time high. So to show you a visual example of this scenario number 2, and by the way, I am not saying that we're going to have a repeat of this cycle. I'm just saying to focus on the structure. Crash, relief rally, pull back. Everyone thinks that's it. And Bitcoin says, fuck off. And it hits a new all-time high. Even if it's a slightly higher high, Bitcoin did this to everybody last cycle, and this messed up a lot of people's TA. I'm just saying. Now a lot of people all these years later are like, I called the top, I did this, I did that, but I guarantee you, look at all of their content around this time. It wasn't as clean as they're portraying it to be. I also thought we would go higher back here, for sure. And then I started teaching myself a little bit more about the market dynamics with the energetics, and I learned about the solar and lunar cycles. And I bought a bunch of Bitcoin all around here. I don't concern myself with, all of this like past stuff. Everybody could look back at the past and say, I said this, I said that, I did this, I did that. But ultimately, all that matters is how do you progress? How do you refine? How do you become better? And for the most part, I've been actually trying to stay neutral because everything has been so polarizing for the last 2 years. So I think my stance on this, although it might not be the most profitable or the best, I still accumulated all of my XRP at a very low price. I'm in big profits on that. I'm in big profits on my Ethereum play and very big profits on my Bitcoin play. So the majority of my portfolio, it's sitting beautiful. But that's just a patience thing, and that's a skin in the game thing, And if you're somebody who's experiencing not the best cycle, well, it's probably because you're too overexposed to altcoins, and the altcoins that you're overexposed to, you're not really sure how to balance those all out to make a sound portfolio. So again, this is why really important to learn how to invest. That's all covered in this crypto mastermind. It includes the exit strategy blueprint for free. And the exit strategy blueprint is still relevant to this day because it actually teaches you a system of how to de-risk your portfolio and how to take profits in your portfolio, no matter what cycle we're in, no matter what the prices currently are, because it teaches you how to use gematria numerology in combo with the TA, which I teach you the TA too. And it's super powerful because it's a very short blueprint, doesn't take you too long to complete it. And for those who have completed it and utilize it, not just copy it, but utilize it, have seen incredible results. It's not something you copy, it's something you learn from and apply to your situation. If anyone's selling you on something to copy them, they're lying to you. That has nothing to do with you becoming educated and you becoming self-reliant. So remember that. Everything I create, it's to make you self-reliant. It's to make you no longer need to copy me. That's the difference. But anyways, coming back to this second example visual, it would be this move right here. We get very oversold, bear trap, pull up. Once we make it into this textbook golden pocket territory, when most people are expecting a dead cat bounce, which would be a breakdown from there and lower lows, Bitcoin has a notable correction, but then fakes everybody out and goes up. And not only does it go up, but it goes higher, makes a higher high. So this is something that we could keep in mind for perhaps like 130K to 140K Bitcoin, which I know it sounds insane. That would be like only 10% higher than where Bitcoin recently topped out. It's not actually insane. It's not calling for a 250K Bitcoin. I'm not calling for a million Bitcoin. I'm saying that that would be a repeat to hit about 130 to 140K. All of the shorts that were piling up recently would of course be washed, and a lot of FOMO would kick in this move. It would be a textbook bull trap after a textbook bear trap. And lastly would be scenario 3, which would be a repeat of the V-shaped recovery crash that we had earlier this year. It would be this to hit a new all-time high effectively immediately with no pullback in between. Just boom, straight new all-time high. That would be scenario number 3. Either of these 3 scenarios I'm expecting purely because of how much fear is in the market right now. And of course, I can make room for an additional scenario, which would be Bitcoin sinking immediately into 70K and lower starting next week, which a lot of you heard me kind of reference throughout sharing these three examples, but that's honestly what everyone would be expecting. Just more and more downside. And perhaps that turns out to be the case, and perhaps I'm wrong. But it truly feels like what we're seeing right now is an absolute trap. And I've heard all of this stuff regarding BlackRock pushing strategy, X Micro Strategy, Michael Saylor's company, that BlackRock is pushing them to trade lower so that they can quote unquote buy cheaper Bitcoin, etc., etc. But if that's the case, that we just continue to go down from here, then I'm personally expecting, quote, the shortest Bitcoin bear market we've ever experienced. One that can be complete as soon as March 2026, when we have our last total lunar eclipse until New Year's in the year 2029. Just like we had a different type of bull run for crypto as a whole this cycle, and we've heard everyone saying this cycle is different, well then, wouldn't you also expect the bear market to be different as well? Here we are essentially one full year from the last time we saw euphoria in this asset class, and now we're seeing depression? Interesting, right? And based on my work solely, it's a tough call to determine the energy we're moving into because I have only one example of a lunar cycle, which are these red boxes, by the way. I have only one example of a lunar cycle with only 3 total lunar eclipses, and that was the one back in 2018 into the 2019 bear market. But the tricky part is that this third and final lunar eclipse of the cycle, which is typically where we bottom, you see us bottoming on the final lunar eclipse of the lunar cycle. We did here, and we also did over here before recovery into the start of the solar cycle. Well, the final lunar eclipse of this lunar cycle was in January, and then the next solar eclipse that started the solar cycle here in 2019 was in July, half a year later. Whilst we're about to have an annular solar eclipse soon. We're about to have an annular solar eclipse in February. And we're about to have that before the lunar eclipse. We're going to have that annular solar eclipse first, followed by a total lunar eclipse just a couple weeks apart. That's not 6 months apart like it was back in 2018 into 2019. We're talking weeks apart. So that is not the same, although the total amount of eclipses overall is the same. And this is why we can have what I just called the shortest Bitcoin bear market ever. So a lot of people that are bears right now that think we're going to sink to, 60 or 50 or 40K right now, they're anticipating it to be 1 year from October, because that's what Bitcoin did from here in November to November 2022. That's what Bitcoin did over here from December to December 2018. And that's also what Bitcoin sort of did from here December. But here you see it's January. And here you see we're still low in August. So why the fuck is everybody making this call that we're supposed to bottom 1 year later? Same thing over here. Nobody is basing this on anything but the halving and maybe a couple other metrics. But it's been only until recently where people started investigating liquidity and actually understanding that. And I believe what runs the liquidity is this solar lunar cycle. Personally, this is what I've come to the understanding of. So while here we had the shortest bear market, here we had a very, very long bear market. You can see for yourself. Look at how long it took from Bitcoin to top to this bottom. 626 days. And then we magically recover after the final lunar eclipse of the lunar cycle. Here we have 1 year on the money, but it was the pivot at the final lunar eclipse of the lunar cycle. Guys, it wasn't 600 days. So I think we need to open up our minds right now. The fact that we are correcting right now is not weird. Absolutely. And also Bitcoin had 30 to 40% corrections like 7 or 8 times all throughout this cycle here into 2017. Excuse me, what's different about what we're seeing right now is we never had an actual euphoric alt season. We had ETH barely hit a new all-time high, and we had Solana barely hit a new all-time high. We barely saw that parabolic, crazy price discovery alt season that we typically get. And the fact that Bitcoin has been solely enjoying price discovery for a long time now tells me that we're in something different, sure, but according to the solar and lunar cycle, we're not. And that makes me actually hopeful that 2026 is going to feel very different than maybe a lot of people who are expecting more and more and more and more bear market to be caught off guard in that way. So we have potentially, and I would love to know some of your opinions, especially the people that are into astrology. If the next solar cycle actually starts on the February 16th annular solar eclipse on Chinese New Year, the start of the year of the horse, that could mean the bottoming formation can be from now until January. And this would make so much more sense as to why we haven't seen a true alt season. And while all the bulls who are still in the game that are screaming 5-year cycle, it actually is just a unique lunar cycle followed by an extended solar cycle that will last almost 3 years. And guess when it leads into, guys? The next Shemitah year. When was the last alt, like crazy alt season? Shemitah year, 2021. I'm just saying, are we about to have the shortest Bitcoin bear market followed by the even longer bull run? And then my thesis that we have only 30 to 50% corrections for Bitcoin for the foreseeable future is a truth. That would be absolutely mind blowing because it would be mimicking what Apple started doing after it recovered from the dot-com bubble. And this to me was our crypto.com bubble, not this. It was this. It was the Terra Luna FTX bullshit. This was when every retail investor started getting into leverage. This is when DeFi and NFTs and all of that stuff, and all of it became very popular in household. This is when Elon Musk went on Saturday Night Live and started talking about Doge. You understand? This was the crypto.com bubble, and that's why Bitcoin is the only one looking good right now, and a lot of other stuff is not looking so good that was created in this cycle, and that is also why a lot of the quote-unquote OG coins are looking better than some of the newer projects that were launched in 2020. Because they've had ample time to recover from that quote-unquote crypto.com bubble, if you understand what I mean. So we're in something that is very fascinating, and it's making me want to create some more unique content to talk more about this, because I believe many of you are probably fascinated with the cyclicality of all of this and how there could be something to that theory. When you look at the way Apple recovered from the dot-com bubble, it continued to only have 30 to 40% corrections for the rest of till today. Even including the C19 crash, it just continued to only have 30 to 40% corrections. I believe that's Bitcoin's future. So, yeah, maybe we do get, let's call it a 50% crash. We trade back into this area over here, and then we do that all by March. And then a lot of people are going to think, okay, we're going lower, we're going lower, we're going lower. But in actuality, Bitcoin tanks way more than all the other altcoins. It's this kind of like isolated ritual, if you will, and they'll blame it on Michael Saylor, they'll blame it on whoever the fuck they want to, but it ends up being the most incredible buying opportunity of a lifetime. And everybody who's expecting an 80% correction like we got in the last cycle, they are sidelined on the recovery. Now, I'm less expecting that in the short term. I could, of course, expect scenario number 2, which is a very technical scenario. That would be the recovery into a bull trap, lower high bull trap, followed by a break of structure. Sure, I could entertain that. but still not having any euphoria, no euphoric alt season to me is very strange. And it's still keeping me bullish overall in 2026 because we're so close to concluding this lunar cycle. So, and if you guys are interested in more about what we're reviewing here, I actually go through it quite a bit inside of this crypto decoding blueprint, which is inside of the decoding mastermind for free. And it's also included in this mastermind package. It's also included over here in this universal package. And for now, let me know, because perhaps we can build off of this even more in upcoming Red Pill podcasts if you guys are interested. But I do feel like this is one of the most fascinating charts available, and it looks a little messy right now just because I've started doing some more recent TA, especially since we've started breaking some of the local structure. But anyways, this would be a great time to kind of wrap up this section, head over into the more traditional analysis and check in on where Bitcoin is at, since we've had that recent death cross and the weekly candle close below the 55 moving average. So I just want to head over to the regular Bitcoin chart. We're looking at the weekly. We're going to pull up this 55 moving average. This is a big development, guys. We are starting to see the 8 kiss on the 55 simple. That is the wolf cross. And the last time we had a wolf cross was effectively a wolf cross to the downside. So downside implied was at the bottom of the initial crash, with the final relief rally coming in to end the cycle. 1 second. Just needed to drink a little bit of water. So what I was saying is that this was the cross which effectively led to the bottom of the initial correction. And then you could see here that we actually gravitated back up to the 55 weekly, and we got rejected off of that, followed by the continuation into a deeper bear market. So if Bitcoin were to pause right here and start a relief rally, you'd want to look for the 55 simple, which sits right now at around 102K. If Bitcoin can get back above the 55 simple, that would invalidate this. And that would also invalidate a lot of the worship over this idea that closing below the 55 weekly is somehow like the only indication that we must be in a bear market. Again, so far it has not failed us, but eventually these things fail. Eventually they don't work forever. So we thought that, for example, that Bitcoin couldn't go below the 200 weekly moving average in the bear market. Well, it did. A lot. Okay, so I don't know what to tell people. Like, you can't just solely lock onto these ideas and then you lose your flexibility, because that's exactly what the market maker wants. They want these things to become popular, and this 55 weekly close has become so popular for Bitcoin. I mean, pretty much everyone, even people who don't know how to use TradingView, are aware of this. So yes, we had the quote unquote death cross, the 55 below the 200. We've sloped deeper. We know this was the 46th, 47th week of the year, and we just saw Bitcoin's daily RSI get to 22. Very, very oversold. We can see that the 2-day got down to 25 RSI. This is very oversold. And then we even see the 3-day getting into oversold territory. We're right at the 200 moving averages on the 3-day chart. So we haven't seen Bitcoin do this since, again, the same level that we bottomed at when the 55 and the 8 simple moving average crossed on the weekly. Same situation back here in January 2022. So you do see what I'm saying when I brought up the idea that we could have 47 days of sideways at the lows. Because look at over here, when Bitcoin completed the crash, from crash date till rejection date took 66 days. This is not weird to do in the event that it's all over. So a little bit of a relief rally from here is totally normal. V-shaped recovery from here, not as normal. And just us crashing and crashing and crashing and crashing, that's also not normal, because it's very typical to find some supports on some of these key moving averages without just breaking lower. Like you could see it right here. When we got to the 200 on the 3-day, we held sideways. It got boring. And then, yes, of course, we did actually fall even deeper, but on the first touch of the 200s, we had a little bit of a relief rally. I know it doesn't look like much, but it was 40%. Over here, when Bitcoin did this, it was, again, 40%. So if we were to look at from where we are now, look at what 40% is, guys. It's right there into the 55 simple moving average, and that would be around 112K, 113K Bitcoin. The percentages don't need a match, but the moving averages usually do. So getting here is a milestone, and I think looking to up 100K plus Bitcoin and that becoming a very dangerous territory for all the people who are super into TA and a lot of people who are like looking to take profits. Of course, naturally, that's going to be an area that it'll liquidate a lot of people who built shorts. It'll do its job, and that's where scenario 2 comes into play that I brought up a little bit earlier. So far, we are oversold, in my opinion. We are closing below some of these key moving averages, closing below the 200s on the 3-day, closing below the 55 weekly. We have 2 weekly closes in a row below that key moving average. We're holding structure, though. Until we break structure, which would be a weekly close below 78K, we are just experiencing chop. And this was the same shit that we did back here. We effectively had a double bottom followed by some sideways. Let's see how long that sideways lasted. Would you look at that? About 2 months. So it took about 7 weeks from where it was low volatility to the end of low volatility before the volatility kicked in. There's something about this time frame. There's something about it to keep in mind. So we're going to as well. And like I said, that could mean we have this awkward end of the year where Bitcoin is just kind of chopping around 80 to 100K, maybe 105K, just chopping, 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 going up, getting rejected, going up, getting rejected. And then if we make it to mid-Jan, and that's effectively our bottom, then that would not be weird for the start of the new solar cycle. It would not be weird. So let's keep that in mind. Let's head over to Ethereum. Ethereum has come back to the 200 on the weekly very rapidly. And you know what this is starting to look like? An inverse head and shoulders. So I'm not going to make it I don't like pattern trading. I don't like purely going off of patterns. But to me, that could very well be our play here because this is a macro play that you could see this shoulder complete in 200 days. This also took about 200 days to complete. And right now, 200 days would be bringing us to the end of Jan. I mean, it doesn't need to be perfect that way, but a measured move on this target, I would assume if we did it purely off of weekly closes, is probably like 9K ETH. I'm going to pull just a conservative. And it's really nice that it's at the 888. Okay, so it's a 10K ETH. I know it sounds insane. It absolutely sounds insane, but doesn't that sound more like the end of the cycle? Instead of ETH barely breaking all-time highs by like a couple of dollars? Come on, fucking weird. But how smart would it be for the market maker to give us a barely higher high and then give us a huge correction, trapping bulls? That makes a lot of sense. So keeping that in mind as well, and effectively we're back in this golden pocket from this entire fib pull going back to the last cycle. Still no price discovery for ETH, just a lot of chop, chop, chop. Also, one thing I want to remind you guys of, this is pretty fascinating. If you take from the cycle peak to the cycle low on Ethereum, it took 217 days. So if we were to have some sort of repeat of that 217 days, you see where it brings us into March. So that's what I'm saying. This could be the shortest bear market ever. And we just don't see it yet, you know? Guys, remember, it took all the way until November for Bitcoin to go much lower than where it was in June because Bitcoin dominance was rotating all throughout this fall. So you should have bought ETH and Solana probably early, and you would have been in a really, really good position. Where was Solana? And okay, so actually, I take that. Let me see, just really quick. So I take that back. It actually took Solana even more time, but I do remember Solana was one of those rare plays that extended past the lunar cycle and hit much, much higher highs. So that doesn't shock me. I do remember, some of you might remember in the last bear market, I said, I anticipate Solana to at least lose 85 to 95% of its value. And it's crazy that it lost 97% of its value. But then the recovery was unbelievable. So just keep that in mind. Look at how choppy and boring Solana has been. I mean, we're talking the same kind of price for 2 years now. It's pretty weird. It's very weird. Something is different about this for sure. We haven't had that rotation yet. It's very strange. So let's go into XRP really quickly. There's not a lot of development here. We're still kind of just holding this major $2 level. It was really great to see XRP get bought back up above $2 into the weekly close. We like to see that. And when we look back at the time of the weekly close into March 31st, at the end of that month leading into the major crash that we had, you can see that was the only like true weekly close below $2. We had one over here in June, effectively looking just like the one we had. And what followed that was an absolute just like 4 straight weeks of bullish candles. But the difference that we're seeing here on the technicals is this 8 crossing below the 55. That is not what we want to see. One thing I will say about XRP though is this was a bottoming structure move, and that was your relief rally. So that, again, kind of very similar to the Bitcoin play. When we had the wolf cross, once bottomed, we saw a 65% relief rally before going deeper into the bear market. And XRP, similar to Ethereum, bottomed early. So you look, June 2022, it was bottoming. I mean, we're talking a couple pennies here, but still, technically the energetics were over earlier, while Bitcoin went much lower, generally speaking, compared to June to November. You could see right here, we could have had all of this accumulation down there, but you would have been feeling like you're trying to catch a falling knife on Bitcoin, for example. So yeah, this very arduous sideways trading range is mimicking here, where it just kept chopping until release. And I'm still hopeful for that release too, with the concept of an incoming alt rotation. Let's move over to Multiverse X, EGLD. Oof. Wow, this is wild. So we talk a lot about the comparisons to 2020 with the fact that we had the C19 crash and the recovery phase. This had the C19 crash and it was effectively a reset because you see it just rocketed up all the way till July. This has been perpetually selling off, and now it's finally back into this cluster, which was considered a a backup phase. So you have your spring, which is like the worst of it, followed by, this didn't even have a test. Usually it'll have a little sideways, like right here. We call it a test. This didn't even have that. It just shot straight up. And then it has this thing called a sign of strength, where we're breaking higher than any previous highs. And then we have a backup phase. This backup phase is a little bit elusive, but it's kind of like what I think Ethereum is doing right now. And this backup phase could be a very large correction for cryptos, for sure. Here you can see it was an 80% fucking correction. That is crazy town. This is what we've just done recently from March this year, pretty much all the way down. So like from December 2024, we've had an 87% correction on this. It's just been perpetually selling off more and more and more and more. So this right here is, we're going to have to pull a fib like this. Yeah, so you see what I did? I pulled a reverse fib from this level of supports over to this swing high. And we did hit the 618. We had it once, twice, 3 times, but then we even failed that. Funny enough, I don't know when the hell I had this blue line drawn. Do you guys want to look up the last time I covered this project? I had this blue line drawn and we just fucking hit it. So let me extend this. Wow. Okay. So we just hit perfectly on both of the major trend lines that I had. One was a horizontal trend line. I'm just adjusting this slightly because this was off. But the support trend line on the bottom, which has been continually falling, falling, and falling. And then also this horizontal trend line, which brought us back to the backup phase of the fall time. You see where we are? It's November 2020. The market looks like absolute dog shit for altcoins. And then bloop. That would be shocking. That would be shocking. So I think right now, let's see how oversold this shit is on like a weekly. Yeah, dude. Look at this. We are at rock bottom. Like this is on the weekly RSI. We are at what we were at the bear market bottom. And this has just been perpetually going lower. So I don't know how much more this can give back. By the way, this used to be $558. It's now lost 99% of its value. So you have to be very careful with stuff like this, guys. This is venture capital. You must not overinvest in these projects. But now that we've had this full fib pull, I'm seeing something clear. We have the 236 sitting at what would be a upcoming resistance level, obviously, because it was an attempted prior support. But effectively, once you could break back above this 382, I think it would have a clear move to the 702, or probably, if it can't get that lucky, at least this territory right here. So I'm going to put a horizontal line around 59. You can see that was this area right here, back test before the blow off top. We came straight back to it, rejected, 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 fell down, rejected, rejected, fell down, rejected, fell down. So if we were to have a clean liquidity swipe from where we currently are to there, that's about a 700% move. That's epic. And that's still great, especially for those who are believing, okay, it's over and see you in 4 years, which I don't understand why people are saying that because it's not how it works. But anyways, just think about that. Like this has now came all the way back to a key level, but I still would be very cautious when I'm looking at charts like this. Only put small amounts into these sorts of projects. Next project we're going to look at is near protocol, right? Protocol or just near? I don't remember. Alrighty, so we're going to extend out this Fibonacci retracement a little bit more. So here we can see a similar thing to what happened to XRP in the last cycle, where we had the 2018 top and then we had the 2021 top. This is kind of what we were dealing with then for XRP. So it feels like a lot of these altcoins did what XRP did in the last cycle. They did it this cycle. And then XRP, what did it do next? It caught back up to the prior cycle before that. So I'm thinking whenever you see charts that look like this, like the way near protocols looks, where we have a major bear market followed by a big move up to the golden pocket, to the 702 specifically, followed by a rejection there. The next major upside move is going to be somewhere, in my opinion, between the 888 and the all-time high. That's what XRP recently just did. It shot from 30 cents to $3. Right? And then it kept getting rejected at prior all-time highs because there's liquidity to fill there. So that's something that could be a little bit of a compass for what's to come on some altcoins popping off. If you're seeing any altcoins pop off straight back to prior cycle highs, I would de-risk. I don't care what the fuck it is. I would de-risk personally. Like if that happens in isolation at any time, whatever the coin is, I would de-risk. I would not keep waiting for higher and higher and higher and higher because it's just liquidity swipe back to, it's repeating what XRP did effectively. And you got to remember, XRP is the second biggest altcoin. I mean, of course, it's probably been de-ranked, like lowered in rank since, but I still think XRP is holding up better than most altcoins right now, comparatively to a lot of others. I mean, it's doing way better than Near, for example. We're only up 80% from the bottom of the bear market. I think XRP is at least 300% up from the bear market bottom, and it's had higher prices since. So just consider where we're at right now in this project. I'm going to move this here because this is a clear level that it was dealing with. If it get above the 382, we can get back to the 702. But like I said, I believe the next major move for this project, when I look at a chart like this, is it's going straight back to the 888 or the prior all-time high, which I'd assume is like an 800% move. Yep, it's about 800 to 900%. Big move. But again, this could take some time to develop. It could take a full-blown recovery for Bitcoin. And right now, things are looking very shaky in the crypto market. So when things are uncertain in Bitcoin, what do you expect them to feel like in these random altcoins? Lots of uncertainty, hence fear and greed index right now. So keep this in mind. This is not the worst looking chart. Looks way better than the multiverse chart, for example. Now we're going to look up Telcoin. What is going on there? This got a lot of votes this week. Okay, nice. Nice move here. I'm looking at the weekly chart. I love when I see a rejection at the 618. So this is something new that we haven't, I don't believe we've seen. It's such a clean example. So we have this major trend line. Whenever the last time I covered this coin, clearly this was marking an important level of resistance as it was perfectly rejected at the golden pocket. But since then, we've had a pretty notable pullback of about 80%, a perfect retest of the 236. I love that. Higher low structure. Okay. Now, if we can get back above the 0.5, which has been acting as a resistance effectively all year for a full year, that would be a clean move to, I mean, of course, we can call it right around the 702 to 786, and that would align with this cluster right here of liquidity somewhere around leading up to 3 cents. So from where we are now to there is about another 300%. Nice. It is zigzagging though. Like, one thing I can say is this has made a big jump from this backup phase following the C19 crash. So remember the first project we looked at, Multiverse X, it was trading right here if you compared. Seriously. So this would have to lose another 97% to be where EGLD is trading at today, structurally. So if you bought the last market, you're still up a lot, 3,000%. So this is holding a lot. It's holding up a lot better than a lot of other things. Even though it's not had like that explosive rally like we've seen back in 2020, not a lot of things have. Some things have in isolation, but we're kind of waiting on that day to come. So don't forget though, this needed to have a perpetual sell-off of 99% before it could have this moment. So keep that in mind for EGLD, because it's effectively looking like this right now. Looks like absolute shit. But that looking like shit thing is needed for a reset. And we're definitely going through a sentiment reset right now. So keep that in mind. This is a good looking chart, but as for price discovery, I don't know if I could commit to that idea. I would say 786 is a good level, because if you look across my screen right here, you'll see why. We don't have much time spent above the 786. So technically 4 cents is in the cards, but it might just be a blow off top. It might just be a single week. So you could keep that in mind. Now we're looking at Research Coin, RSO. No, RSR is reserve rights. I believe you guys wanted to look at reserve rights. Oof. Not good. It's breaking through this parallel channel. So this has now come back to the levels of August 2024. August has been a weird month in crypto for sure. We have these August new moon flash corrections that have been pretty common. But now we've come back to this same level that we were pretty much, it was pretty much extremes. We're really low on the RSI, so this is getting oversold for sure. If I show you where my cursor is, we don't have too much time at a lower RSI than this, and this is the weekly, by the way. So technically, when you're in areas like this, it's time to accumulate. Whilst when you're in these overbought areas, it's time to de-risk. From here to just getting back to this 702 level is almost 800%. So keep that in mind. This is in that kind of position to do what I was saying earlier that XRP did, where it goes up and breaks golden pocket and gets back into the 888 to the top. That's a dramatic call. So just keep in mind, like, be flexible with that idea. It's not 100% in the cards, but I mean, just consider that we do have some liquidity that's sitting around 6 cents with a couple of swipes here, and we have this cluster right there. That'd be almost 7 cents. That's a 2000% move from here. And we know we could do a 2000% move on this coin. Just look at this. That's 1400%. But you have to know how to get out of this. You need to know how to de-risk, because that's a big wick. And this was a big rejection too. So just consider there can be some painful corrections on the way up to 1400% move, as you can see right there. Sure, buying the bottom to this top was 1400%, but it had a 76% correction in the middle. Not everyone's going to know how to play that. All right. People are losing their fucking minds after Bitcoin had a 36% correction. So imagine that, right? That's what makes crypto, that's what makes you need to be stoic in crypto. Like, you need to just like keep it together. And I think that's one thing I could say, that like, regardless of this chart and any analysis, that's a big takeaway when we look at charts like this and when we talk about altcoins in general. Let's wrap this one up talking about Sologenic. I believe it's been some time since I've looked at this, but I remember this chart having that spike up, got very, very overbought. I wonder what my sentiment was on this, because I do have this green line here. It's likely there for a reason, and usually when I draw these lines above, it's because those are de-risking zones or areas to take profit. So if that was the case, then we kissed that area, and that would have been a beautiful play. Guys, when I'm doing these red pills, I do share levels, and these are ideas that you can utilize with your own understanding of technical analysis and your own exit strategy that you've created, and determine, why or how much or whatever when it comes to setting up an exit strategy. So these horizontal levels are usually levels that get grabbed, and it was clear here, and from there, it's now gone down 80%. So it's not a game. We do have higher, more exaggerated levels to keep in mind, because sometimes those do come to fruition, but I never teach you to put 100% of your orders always at the upper extremes. You want to be conservative, especially in crypto. And if you bought the bear market on this in several occasions, I mean, getting greedy on a 700% play is not the move. I've even had a couple of those happen to me this cycle where I didn't sell after seeing, 500, 600, 700%. And I look back at it and I'm like, who cares? Just take profits, like, especially on stuff that's venture capital, that's only like a couple percent in your portfolio. If you're seeing it go up 400% in a week, why hold on to it just for the sake of more gains? It just doesn't make sense. I mean, look at this massacre. This thing crashed 90% in 3 weeks, and then from that crash it went up again 8,000% in the next 4 weeks. Like, what the hell? Absolutely crazy price action. But getting back to this, where we're at right now is a nice level, because it should be a level of support. We have here about 100 days of getting a rejection. Here it was a rejection at the same level, and here was a bunch of attempts at support, followed by the launch of this project, all at the same level, like around 15 cents. So we've hit bottom there again. I think this is a good level to consider. Although, yes, if we do have more blood in the streets ahead, of course, this can keel over even deeper. And if Bitcoin steals more dominance, of course, it could keel over even more. But we're at extremes in Bitcoin right now, and we're probably facing up against a little bit of a difficult to comprehend move. And what would be the most likely would be a bullish move after we've been so perpetually bearish for so many weeks now. So I'm going to wrap this one up here. I appreciate and I'm grateful for every single one of you. What a red pill. I pack this one with value. There's so much that we talked about an hour and 20 minutes in. Again, I am running this Black Friday sale for you guys over here in our mastermind community, our Patreon supporters. It's the biggest sale I've ever held over on my website. You could use this special promo code here to get the biggest discount available on any of my individual courses. And then, of course, for an even bigger discount, I have the package deals over here and the universal package. All of the courses together in one, best value possible. So definitely go over and check that out if you're interested. This will be live likely through the weekend next week, with Black Friday, of course, being this upcoming Friday. And until then, I'm wishing you all an amazing rest of your weekend in the Matrix. Much love.